A Farmer and His Foolish Son. In a quiet valley where the golden wheat bent gently beneath the afternoon sun, there lived an old farmer named Haran. His hands were rough like the bark of an old oak tree, his back curved from years of toil, and his eyes still sharp as a hawk's. He had spent his entire life coaxing life from the stubborn soil, plowing, sowing, watering, and harvesting with patience that only the earth could teach. His small farm, though humble, was the pride of the village. People often said, if the land listens to anyone, it listens to Farmer Haran. But the same could not be said for his son, Ravi. Ravi was tall, strong, and young, but utterly foolish. He had the energy of 10 men, but the wisdom of none. He was the kind of boy who believed he could outsmart the rain, outrun the wind, and charm the crows into doing his work. Haran had tried to teach him the art of farming, how to feel the soil, when to plant the seeds, and when to let nature rest, but Ravi's mind was always elsewhere. He preferred sitting beneath the banyan tree near the pond, daydreaming about riches and fame, imagining himself as a merchant or a king, rather than a farmer. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky with shades of fire and gold, Haran returned home from the fields exhausted. He found Ravi lounging near the hut, tossing stones at a clay pot for fun. The old man sighed deeply. "Ravi," he said, setting down his hoe, "have you watered the seedlings today?" Ravi shrugged lazily. "Oh, father, they looked fine this morning. Plants don't need so much water. Besides, it might rain tonight." Haran frowned. The sky was clear, not a single cloud in sight. "You can't wait for rain when the sun is blazing, boy. The crops need care, every day. You must treat them as you would treat your own child." Ravi laughed. "Then perhaps the plants will grow foolish like me." The father's heart sank at his son's words. "Ravi," he said quietly, "a man who does not learn from his land learns from his mistakes. And the land can be a cruel teacher." But Ravi wasn't listening. He had already started humming a song and walking toward the village square where his friends gathered to gossip and play dice. That night, Haran sat outside the hut, looking up at the stars. His wife, Mira, brought him a bowl of lentils and said softly, "He will learn in time. He's still young." Haran nodded slowly. "I hope so. But the world doesn't wait for fools to grow wise." The next morning, the old farmer rose before dawn, as he always did. The rooster had barely crowed when he was already out in the fields. The soil was dry, too dry. The tender seedlings were wilting. He felt a pang of worry. If this continued, his crops would die before harvest. When Ravi finally appeared, yawning and scratching his head, Haran handed him a bucket. "Today you will water the field. Every inch of it." Ravi groaned. "All of it? That's too much work, father." "Work," Haran said, "is what keeps your belly full and your roof over your head. Now go." Grumbling, Ravi trudged to the field with the bucket, but halfway through, he grew tired. The sun was high, the air hot, and the boy's patience thinner than a reed. So he decided on a shortcut, a foolish one. He filled the bucket only once, poured all the water near the edge of the field, and said to himself, "Water will spread by itself. Plants don't need that much anyway." Then he lay down under the shade of a tree and drifted to sleep. By the evening, the farmer came to inspect the work. He saw the parched soil, the dying sprouts, and the single wet patch of earth near the edge. His heart burned with anger and disappointment. "Ravi," he shouted. The boy woke with a start. "Father, I watered the plants." Ravi stammered. "You watered the dust." Haran barked. "You think the land will forgive your laziness? You mock the very soil that feeds you." Ravi scowled. "Why does it matter so much? It's just a few plants. Those few plants feed us through the year, boy. Without them, we starve." Haran's voice broke with emotion. "You think work is beneath you, but one day, you will see the worth of what you have ignored." The boy turned away, muttering under his breath, "Maybe I'll find an easier way to earn a living." Haran looked at him long and hard. "An easier way? There is no easier way, Ravi. Every path in life demands effort. But if you must learn the hard way, so be it. That night, as the cicadas sang in the dark and the moonlight washed over the sleeping fields, Haran made a silent vow. He would teach his son the value of labor, even if it broke his heart to do so. For the first time, he realized that wisdom could not be given. It had to be earned through the trials of one's own mistakes. And deep inside, a strange sense of destiny stirred. Something told him that this foolish boy's journey would soon change both their lives forever. The next morning dawned with a sharp cry from the roosters, and the smell of damp earth drifted through the farmer's hut. The air was heavy, almost expectant, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Haran rose quietly from his mat, his thoughts heavy. He had spent the night thinking, searching for a way to awaken sense in his son without harsh punishment. Mira, his wife, watched him prepare for the day. "You're worried again," she said softly. "You didn't sleep a wink." Haran nodded. "I am worried, Mira. I have labored all my life to build this farm, to make it flourish even in the hardest seasons. But what will become of it when I am gone? Ravi does not understand the value of this soil. He thinks it's just dirt beneath his feet." Mira smiled faintly. Perhaps the boy needs a lesson that life itself will teach. Words have not reached him. Maybe experience will. The farmer's eyes lit with a quiet spark. "Yes, the experience." He sat down beside her and said in a low voice, "I think I have found a way. But it must be done wisely." Later that morning, Haran called out, "Ravi, come here, boy." Ravi stumbled out of the hut, rubbing his eyes. "Father, can it wait? The sun's barely up." "Work waits for no one," Haran said sternly. "And what I have to say is important." That caught Ravi's attention. His father's voice carried a rare gravity. Haran looked out toward the wide fields where the wheat shimmered under the early sun. "I am not a young man anymore, Ravi. My strength fades with each season. But before I die, I want to leave you something valuable, something that will change your life forever." Ravi blinked. "Valuable? You mean money?" Haran smiled mysteriously. "More valuable than money. I am talking about a treasure, buried somewhere in our land." Ravi's sleepy eyes widened. "A treasure? Here? In our field?" "Yes," Haran said solemnly. "Long ago, when I was your age, I buried a treasure chest in this land. Gold coins, jewels, things that could make a man rich for life. But I never dug it up. I kept it there, waiting for the right time, waiting for the right person to inherit it." Ravi's heart started to race. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's dig it up now." But Haran raised a hand.
"No.
The treasure is hidden deep beneath the soil, scattered across the field. It can only be found by digging the entire field from one end to the other. You must work the land carefully, turn every patch of earth until the whole field has been tilled. Only then will the treasure reveal itself." Ravi's eyes gleamed with greed. "I'll start right away, Father." Haran nodded slowly. "Good. But remember, it will take hard work, many days, maybe weeks. Don't expect it to come easily." Ravi grinned. "I'll dig faster than you ever have. You'll see." As the boy ran off to fetch tools, Mira whispered from behind, "Are you sure this is wise? You're tricking him." Haran smiled faintly.
"No, Mira.
"I'm teaching him. The treasure is not what he thinks it is, but by the time he realizes that, he'll have learned what no amount of gold could teach." From that day onward, Ravi became a different person, or, at least, he seemed to be. He rose early, sweat already glistening on his brow before the sun had even climbed high. With shovel and hoe in hand, he began turning the soil, digging deeper and deeper. The once lazy boy now worked with fierce determination, driven by greed and curiosity. Day after day, he toiled under the burning sun. His hands blistered, his shoulders ached, and his back screamed for rest. But still, he dug on. "Father," he would call out each evening, "I've dug half the field already. There's nothing yet, but I'm sure it's close." Haran would smile quietly. "Keep going, my son. The earth tests those who seek its rewards." And so Ravi kept digging. He tilled every inch of the land, breaking the soil until it was soft and rich again. When rain finally came, it soaked deep into the ground, nourishing it more than it had in years. Weeks passed. When the last corner of the field had been turned, Ravi stood panting, covered in mud from head to toe. "Father," he shouted, "I've dug the whole field, but there's no treasure. Nothing but earth." Haran walked out slowly, pretending to look surprised. "No treasure? Nothing," Ravi cried in frustration. "Not a single coin. You lied to me." The old farmer shook his head gently.
No, Ravi.
"I did not lie. I said the treasure would be found when the field was dug." He pointed toward the soft, freshly turned soil. "Look around you. The land is ready now. Plant the seeds, and you will see your treasure soon enough." Ravi stared blankly. "Seeds? You mean I did all this digging just for farming again?" "Yes," Haran said calmly. "But this time, the soil is the richest it's ever been. You've done in weeks what would have taken me months. Now, plant the seeds, and you'll see what kind of gold the earth gives to those who work for it." Though still grumbling, Ravi did as told. He planted the seeds, wheat, millet, and pulses, across the newly dug field. The rain continued for several days, and the land began to awaken. Tiny green shoots appeared, then stronger stalks, until the field shimmered like a sea of emerald. Ravi had never seen anything like it. The plants grew taller and healthier than ever before, their leaves shining with life. When the harvest season came, the yield was more than double the usual. The granaries filled to the brim, and the villagers came to marvel at the sight. "Farmer Haran, your field is a miracle," they said. "Such crops haven't been seen in years." Ravi's chest swelled with pride. For the first time, he understood the joy of a farmer's harvest, the sweet reward of sweat and soil. But inside, Haran only smiled quietly to himself. The treasure had been found, not in gold, but in wisdom. Still, Haran knew the lesson wasn't over. He could see it in Ravi's eyes, that glimmer of greed, that restlessness. The boy had learned to work, yes, but not yet to think beyond himself. And that, Haran knew, would soon lead to the next test. The harvest was like no other that year. The air smelled of ripe grain. The golden fields stretched far and wide like an ocean of sunlight, and the sound of laughter filled the farmyard. Villagers came to help, to admire, and to celebrate the abundance that had sprung from Haran's land. Ravi strutted among them, his chest puffed with pride. "Look at this," he said, showing off the overflowing baskets of wheat. "No farmer in this valley has ever grown so much in a single season. I must have inherited Father's magic touch after all." The villagers chuckled politely. But Haran, standing nearby, said nothing. He simply watched his son with quiet eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by words. That evening, when the work was done and the sky glowed crimson, Ravi sat outside the hut counting the sacks of grain. "Father," he said, "this harvest is worth a fortune. We could sell half of it in the market and still have enough for the year. Think of what we could buy: new tools, a bigger house, maybe even a cart and oxen." Haran's eyes softened, but his tone remained steady. "We will keep what we need and sell only a fair share. Remember, Ravi, wealth is like rain, it comes and goes. What matters is how wisely you use it." Ravi frowned. "Why think small when we can be rich, Father? You've worked your whole life and still live in this old hut. Don't you ever want more?" The old farmer smiled faintly. "Contentment is the richest treasure, my son. Those who chase more often end up with less." But Ravi was no longer listening. His thoughts were racing. More. I could have more. The land gave us this once. Why not again? That night, while his parents slept, Ravi lay awake staring at the roof. He thought of the villagers' admiring faces, of coins clinking in his hand, of how it felt to be praised. "If one season of hard work gave me this," he whispered to himself, "then I'll do even more next season. I'll double the harvest again, and this time, I'll keep the profit for myself." And so began Ravi's next mistake. When the next planting season arrived, Haran noticed that his son had grown restless. "You're up early today," he said one morning. "Yes," Ravi replied with forced cheerfulness. "I'm planning ahead. I'll need more land this time." I want to expand beyond our borders. Haran raised an eyebrow. More land? But that would mean borrowing from the landlord. We'd owe him rent. So what? Ravi said carelessly. I'll make double the profit. I'll pay him easily. Haran shook his head. Greed blinds, Ravi. Be careful that your hunger for gain doesn't eat the sense you've just begun to grow. But Ravi was already on his way to the landlord's house, full of confidence and excitement. The landlord, a sly man named Banu, welcomed Ravi with a grin. Young Haran's boy. I've heard of your fine harvest. So you want to lease more land? Yes, Ravi said eagerly. As much as you'll allow. Banu's eyes gleamed. I can give you 10 extra acres, but the rent will be due after harvest, 10 sacks of grain per acre. Ravi did a quick calculation in his head.
Deal.
I'll pay it easily. I'll make triple that amount. And just like that, the deal was made. Ravi signed a crude agreement, sealed it with a thumbprint, and walked home feeling like a king. When Haran learned of it, he was silent for a long time. You've made a promise you may not be able to keep, he said finally. Ravi scoffed. You worry too much, father. You'll see, I'll make you proud. Haran's reply was quiet, almost like a prayer. Pride grows faster than crops, Ravi. But unlike crops, it bears no fruit. The months passed. Ravi worked tirelessly, but this time his effort was driven by greed, not love for the land. He sowed too quickly, without resting the soil or tending to its needs. He forced the oxen to plow day after day until they grew thin and weary. He ignored his father's warnings about timing and weather, trusting only his ambition. At first, it seemed to work. The seedlings sprouted, and Ravi's confidence swelled. See, father, he said proudly. Soon the fields will be twice as rich. But nature has its own rhythm, and no man can rush it. The rains came too soon, drenching the overworked soil. Then the sun returned too fiercely, cracking the ground. Weeds sprang up, choking the crops that Ravi had planted in haste. Haran tried to help. Let's tend to the roots before it's too late, he said. We must weed the fields. But Ravi, stubborn and impatient, refused. There's no time. The harvest will come soon enough. I'll deal with it then. By the time harvest arrived, the once promising fields were a mess of wilted stalks and ruined grain. The extra acres yielded almost nothing. Ravi's face fell as he looked at the meager crop. No, this can't be. The landlord, Banu, arrived soon after, smiling coldly. Well, young farmer, I see your fortune didn't favor you this time. I'll still need my rent, 10 sacks per acre. Ravi's stomach twisted. I don't have that much grain. Banu shrugged. Then I'll take your oxen and half your store as payment. Ravi's voice cracked with panic. You can't do that. I can, Banu said. You signed the agreement. Haran stood silently as his son watched the oxen being led away. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep sadness. This is how greed repays, Ravi, he said softly. It gives you dreams, but leaves you empty-handed. Ravi dropped to his knees, burying his face in his hands. I just wanted to make us richer. I didn't mean for this to happen. Haran knelt beside him and placed a calloused hand on his shoulder. The land gives according to what you give it, my son. You must treat it in life, with patience and care. You worked hard once, and the land rewarded you. But this time, you tried to command it instead of serving it. Tears rolled down Ravi's cheeks, mixing with the dust. I understand now, father. I was foolish. I wanted gold, but I lost what mattered most. Haran smiled gently. Then you have finally begun to learn. Loss is a cruel teacher, but a true one. That night, Ravi sat outside watching the stars. For the first time in his life, he didn't dream of riches or fame. He thought instead of his father's words, the treasure in the soil, the value of work, the patience of the earth. He realized that the true wealth of a farmer was not gold or jewels, but the simple joy of watching life grow from his hands. And in that quiet moment, a seed of wisdom was planted deep within him, one that would take time, care, and humility to grow. The days that followed were heavy and silent on the farm. The laughter that once echoed across the fields had faded. The oxen were gone, the granary half empty, and Ravi's spirit hung low like a wilting plant. He no longer woke with the sunrise. He no longer sang or boasted. Instead, he sat beneath the banyan tree for hours, staring blankly at the horizon. The villagers, who had once admired his harvest, now whispered among themselves.
He was too proud, they said.
The boy forgot that the land humbles even the strongest. Haran ignored their words. He worked quietly each day, tending what little crop they had left. His steps were slower now, his breath heavier, but his patience remained unbroken. One afternoon, as he worked near the edge of the field, he noticed something that made him stop. An old mango tree, one that had stood for decades, was dying. Its leaves were dry, its bark cracked, and the once thick branches sagged under their own weight. Haran sighed softly. That tree had given fruit to generations. It had shaded him when he was a young man and played beneath it with Mira before their marriage. That evening, he called to his son. "Ravi," he said, pointing to the tree. "Do you see that mango tree over there?" Ravi glanced at it half-heartedly. "It looks dead." "It is dying," Haran said. "But not dead yet. I want you to bring it back to life." Ravi frowned. "Bring it back to life? How can I? The rains have passed, the soil around it is dry, and the branches are brittle." Haran's voice was calm, steady. "You'll find a way. Life does not give up easily, not if one truly tries to save it. Start tomorrow." Ravi didn't understand why his father cared so much about an old tree when the fields themselves were struggling. But something in Haran's tone stopped him from arguing. The next morning, Ravi stood before the withered mango tree with a bucket of water in hand. The air was still and hot, the kind of day that made the earth crack beneath your feet. He poured the water around the base, but the soil drank it greedily, leaving no sign of moisture. He sighed and muttered, "This is useless." Still, he returned the next day. And the next. He dug trenches around the roots, carried more water, and even mixed ash and compost from the barn to feed the soil. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, something began to change, not in the tree, but in Ravi himself. Each morning, as he approached the dying tree, he noticed small details he'd never paid attention to before. The texture of the bark, the way ants crawled up the trunk, the way the roots spread deep beneath the ground like unseen veins of life. He began to feel a strange connection to the silent tree, as though both of them were struggling for the same thing, to grow again. One evening, Haran came to check his progress. "You've been at it for weeks," he said. "Do you see any difference?" Ravi looked up at the branches, where faint green buds had begun to appear like tiny sparks of hope. "Maybe," he said quietly. "It's not dead yet." Haran nodded. "Then keep at it. The earth always rewards patience." Another month passed. The rains returned, not heavy storms, but soft showers that kissed the soil. Ravi smiled as he worked, feeling the rhythm of the land once more. The mango tree began to change. Its leaves turned green again, small flowers bloomed, and before long, tiny mangoes hung from its branches like blessings. When the first fruit ripened, Haran and Mira stood beside Ravi under the shade of the revived tree. Haran reached up, plucked a mango, and held it out to his son. "Taste it," he said. Ravi took a bite. The sweetness filled his mouth, rich and warm. He closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the flavor and the memory of the effort that had gone into saving the tree. Haran spoke softly, "You see, my son, life gives in the same measure that we give to it. You tended this tree not because it promised reward, but because you cared. That is how all good things grow, with patience, love, and sincerity, not greed." Ravi looked at his father, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand now. The field, the crops, even the people around us, they're all like this tree. They need time, attention, and care. I was blind before, thinking only of what I could take." Haran smiled. "And now you see what you can give." The two of them sat under the mango tree as the sun set behind the hills. For the first time, Ravi felt peace, not the shallow satisfaction of profit, but the deep, quiet joy of purpose. As fireflies began to flicker in the twilight, Haran said, "Ravi, remember this day. You brought life back to something dying. That is the true power of a farmer, not to chase wealth, but to nurture it." Ravi nodded slowly. "Father, I will never forget." The following days were filled with new life. Ravi began working beside Haran once more, this time with genuine care. He repaired fences, tended animals, and helped neighbors who struggled with their own fields. Word spread through the village that the farmer's son had changed. "Ravi isn't the fool he once was," the villagers said. "He has learned the farmer's wisdom." But Haran, watching quietly, knew that wisdom was a seed that still needed tending. And fate, like the seasons, was not done testing them yet. For even as the farm flourished again, dark clouds, both literal and unseen, were gathering beyond the valley. The monsoon that year came late, but when it arrived, it came with fury. For weeks, the wind howled through the valley, tearing at thatched roofs and bending the trees until they creaked in protest. The river that ran near the edge of the village, once calm and silver in the sun, had turned into a roaring brown serpent, swallowing everything in its path. Ravi stood at the doorway of their hut, watching as the rain lashed the fields. The crops swayed violently, the young wheat nearly flattened by the downpour. Fear gnawed at him, but he clenched his fists. "Father," he said, "we have to do something. The water is flooding the lower fields." Haran, sitting quietly near the fire, looked up. His face was calm but grave. "We can't fight the storm, my son. We can only protect what we can and wait for it to pass. But if we do nothing, we'll lose everything," Ravi argued, the sound of thunder drowning his words. Haran stood and placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder. "You've learned to work, Ravi. Now you must learn to endure. Nature gives and takes as she pleases. A wise farmer knows when to act and when to wait." Ravi bit his lip, torn between patience and panic. The memory of their lost harvest and his past mistakes flashed before him. He couldn't bear to lose it all again. "I won't just stand here," he said, grabbing a lantern. Before Haran could stop him, Ravi ran into the rain, the wind howling against his body like 1,000 invisible hands. The field was half submerged, and water gushed through the ditches he and his father had dug months before. He began to stack sandbags near the borders, trying to divert the flow. Each wave of rain felt like a hammer striking him down, but he didn't stop. Mud clung to his legs, water splashed in his eyes, but his resolve burned brighter than ever. After a while, Haran appeared beside him, carrying a spade. "You fool," he shouted through the storm, though there was pride in his voice. "If you insist on saving the field, then I'll help you." Together they worked through the night, shoulder to shoulder, father and son battling the wrath of nature. They dug new trenches to guide the floodwater toward the stream, reinforced the bunds with stones, and saved as many plants as they could. By dawn, the storm began to fade. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and a pale light crept over the horizon. The field was a mess, muddy, torn, and waterlogged, but much of it had survived. Ravi collapsed onto the wet earth, gasping for breath. "We did it, we saved them," he murmured. Haran sat beside him, his face weary but serene. "You did it, Ravi. You fought for what matters. This is the first time I've seen you protect the land, not for gold or pride, but because you care." Ravi looked at his father with wet eyes, the rain mixing with tears. "I couldn't let it die, father. I couldn't watch everything we built wash away. I remember what you said, the land gives what we give it. I wanted to give it my all." Haran smiled faintly. "Then you've finally understood the heart of a farmer." When the sun rose fully, the villagers came out of their homes, surveying the damage. Some had lost entire fields, others their cattle or roofs. Haran and Ravi, despite exhaustion, began helping their neighbors without hesitation. They offered tools, shared what grain they had stored, and repaired broken fences. As Ravi helped an old widow fix her small vegetable patch, she said, "You're not the same boy you used to be. Your father must be proud." Ravi smiled humbly. "He is the reason I've learned what truly matters." That night, The rain had finally stopped. The stars returned to the sky, glittering like 1,000 lamps. The sound of frogs and crickets filled the air, a symphony of rebirth. The farm was scarred, but alive. Haran and Ravi sat together outside their hut, their feet resting on the damp soil. The scent of wet earth, petrichor, rose around them, clean and rich. "Father," Ravi said softly, "I used to think treasure was something buried in the ground. But now I see, it's in the ground itself, in the life it gives." Haran turned to him, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Yes, my son. The earth doesn't need us to conquer it. It needs us to understand it. That's where true prosperity lies." Ravi nodded. "From now on, I'll be the farmer you always hoped I'd be. Not for wealth, but for worth." Haran's face softened. "Then my heart can finally rest easy." But even as the storm passed, Haran's strength began to wane. The long night of toil and rain had taken a toll on his aging body. He coughed more often, his hands trembled, and the once tireless farmer began to tire easily. Ravi noticed and tried to hide his worry. "Father, rest today. I'll manage the fields." Haran smiled weakly. "You're ready now, aren't you?" "I've waited a long time to hear those words." And so Ravi worked alone for the first time. He rose before dawn, plowed, sowed, and watered with a diligence that amazed even the villagers. Under his care, the fields flourished again, stronger than before. The mango tree near their home bloomed more fruit than ever, as if celebrating his growth. Each evening, Ravi would bring a basket of fresh produce to his father. "The land is kind again," he would say. And Haran, with a fading smile, would reply, "It is because you have become kind to it." But fate, like the weather, changes without warning. One morning, as the sun broke over the hills and light touched the golden fields, Ravi entered the hut to find his father still in bed, breathing shallowly. "Father," he whispered, kneeling beside him. Haran opened his eyes slowly and smiled. "The land is in your hands now, Ravi. Promise me one thing." Ravi's voice broke. "Anything, father. Promise that you will never let greed guide your heart again. Let patience, kindness, and humility be your roots. That is the true inheritance of a farmer." Ravi clasped his father's hand tightly. "I promise, father. On this soil, on this life, I promise." Haran's eyes closed gently, a peaceful expression resting on his face. The storm outside had passed, but another kind of peace had come within. Days later, the villagers gathered beneath the old mango tree for Haran's funeral. The tree stood tall and green, its branches heavy with fruit, as though nature itself bowed in silent respect. Ravi placed his father's favorite hat at the foot of the tree and whispered, "You taught me everything, father, even how to grow without you." The wind stirred, rustling through the leaves, and for a moment, Ravi thought he heard his father's voice in the breeze, soft, patient, and proud. The storm had passed, but its memory clung to the valley like a scar. The fields were battered, fences broken, and the mango tree that once symbolized hope now stood with half its branches torn and stripped of leaves. The smell of wet soil mixed with the bitterness of loss hung in the air. For days, Ravi walked through the ruins of their land, unable to speak. His feet sank into the muddy ground, and every broken stalk seemed to whisper a reminder of his failure. He remembered how he had tried to protect the crops, how he had tied the fences, covered the seedlings, and stayed awake through the night, but the storm had been stronger than his efforts. Haran, though weak and coughing, had stood beside him through it all. Yet now, as the old man rested in bed, his face pale and breath shallow, Ravi felt the full weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He sat beside his father one morning and said quietly, "Father, I did everything I could, but the storm took everything again." Haran smiled faintly. "The storm takes only what it must, my son. But tell me what remains." Ravi frowned. "Nothing, father. The crops are gone. The fences are broken. The mango tree is dying again." "No," Haran whispered, gripping his son's wrist with surprising strength. "Look closer. What remains, Ravi, is you. The land is not lost if the hands that love it still live. Ravi's eyes stung with tears. But how can I start again? Everything I touch seems to fail. Haran took a slow breath. Then touch it again and again until it grows. That is the only way a farmer learns, by failing, falling, and planting once more. The next morning, Haran's fever worsened. Mira wept silently as Ravi went out to the fields. The village was quiet. Even the birds seemed to mourn. He walked through the mud, stopped near the mango tree, and fell to his knees. "Please," he whispered, touching the wounded bark. "Not again. Don't let everything die." The sky was gray, but far in the east, a soft ray of light began to break through the clouds. It shone gently on the tree, on the earth, and on Ravi's face. He closed his eyes, feeling something stir inside him. Not hope exactly, but determination. He stood up, picked up his hoe, and began to work. Days turned into weeks once more. Ravi labored harder than he ever had before. He repaired every fence, replanted every seed, and carried water to every dry patch of land. He worked before sunrise and long after sunset, his hands blistered, his clothes soaked in sweat. The villagers watched from a distance.
"Poor boy," they said.
"He's working alone now. The old man may not survive the season." But slowly, as if the earth had been listening, green began to return. The crops sprouted again. The air felt warmer, fresher. Even the mango tree, broken by the storm, began to bloom once more. One evening, as Ravi tended to the animals, Mira came running from the house. Her eyes were bright. "Ravi, your father, he's awake." Ravi dropped everything and rushed inside. Haran was sitting up in bed, weak but smiling. "You look different, my son," he said softly. "There's something in your eyes, peace." Ravi knelt beside him. "Father, I did as you taught me. I didn't stop. I worked, I planted again, and look, the crops are returning." Haran's eyes filled with tears. Then the farm lives, and so does our family spirit. You've become a true farmer now." Ravi shook his head. "Not yet, father. Not until the harvest fills your hands again." Haran chuckled faintly. "Then I shall wait for that day." When the harvest came, it was like none they had seen before. The fields shimmered with gold under the sun, and the villagers gathered to help. The mango tree bore fruit once more, richer, sweeter than before the storm. At the heart of it all stood Ravi, strong and proud, but no longer foolish. He didn't boast or dream of wealth. Instead, he worked silently, sharing his crops with the neighbors who had lost theirs. That evening, as the sun set over the valley, Haran sat under the mango tree, watching his son with quiet pride. "Do you remember," he asked, "when I told you that a farmer's strength lies not in his field, but in his heart?" Ravi nodded. "Yes, father. I understand now. The land gives back what we give it. And when we care for it, it cares for us in return." Haran smiled, his old eyes shining with contentment. "Then my work is done." Mira brought them both bowls of warm rice. The family ate together beneath the same tree that had once withered, now full of life again. The wind whispered softly through the leaves, as if the earth itself was blessing them. That night, as the moon rose high, Haran placed his hand over Ravi's and said, "Promise me one thing, my son." "Anything, father." "Promise me you'll never let greed blind you again. Remember that true wealth lies in patience, kindness, and the love you sow." Ravi's eyes glistened. "I promise, father. I will never forget." And from that day on, the foolish son was foolish no more. But fate still had one last test for Ravi, one that would show the world whether he had truly learned the wisdom of his father's words. The months passed gently, and peace returned to the valley. Ravi had transformed the farm into a living symbol of patience and wisdom. Birds sang once again at dawn, oxen plowed the fertile fields, and villagers often came to seek Ravi's advice. "Your father raised a wise son," they would say. "The land listens to your hands, Ravi." But Ravi only smiled humbly and replied, "The land listens to love, not hands. My father taught me that." Though Haran had grown weaker, his spirit remained bright. Each morning, he would sit by the window, watching Ravi work with the same rhythm he once had. Sometimes he would call out small reminders, turn the soil before the rains, or let the calves rest in the shade. Ravi followed every word like sacred scripture. For a time, life felt whole again. Yet deep within Ravi's heart, a quiet fear lingered. His father was growing frailio each day. He could see it in Haran's trembling fingers, the way his breath grew shorter with every passing week. Still, Haran smiled and said, "Don't worry for me, my son. I've seen the land live again through you. That's all the peace I need." As the next harvest season approached, dark news spread through the neighboring villages. A new tax had been declared by the landlord, one that demanded a share of every farmer's yield, double what was taken before. Many farmers protested, but their voices were silenced by guards and threats. One evening, as Ravi sat by his father's bed, a group of villagers came rushing to their door. "Ravi," they cried, "the landlord's men are coming tomorrow to take the harvest. They say we owe them for the past drought years too. If they take it, none of us will have food left." Ravi's heart pounded. He looked to his father, who listened silently. After a moment, Haran spoke weakly. "The greed of men is like a second storm. It destroys what nature spares. But this time, it is you who must protect the land, Ravi." Ravi clenched his fists. "I won't let them take what we have worked for. I'll find a way." That night, he walked through the fields under the pale moonlight. The crops swayed gently, golden and ripe. Every stalk represented months of struggle, pain, and hope. He thought of the villagers who had helped him rebuild after the storm, their trust, their kindness. By dawn, Ravi had made a decision. When the landlord's men arrived, they found Ravi standing tall at the edge of the village. A group of farmers gathered behind him. The head guard sneered. "Step aside, boy. We've come for the landlord's share." Ravi's voice was steady but firm. "You'll take only what's fair, not what will starve our families." The guard laughed. "And who are you to decide what's fair?" "I'm a farmer," Ravi replied. "The same as every man here. And this land feeds us all, not your master's greed." The crowd murmured, emboldened by Ravi's courage. The guards moved forward, but Ravi didn't step back. "If you want the grain," he said, "you'll have to take it from our hands. But remember, without us, the land will go barren. Then even your master's table will be empty." The head guard hesitated. The farmers began to form a line beside Ravi, holding tools and sticks, not as weapons, but as symbols of defiance. The tension hung thick in the air. Finally, the guard growled, "We'll be back." They turned and left, their threats echoing down the dirt road. That night, the villagers celebrated in quiet relief. But Ravi knew the fight wasn't over. He visited his father, who was lying weak but awake. "You stood your ground," Haran whispered proudly. "You didn't fight with anger, but with truth. That's the strength of a farmer's heart." Ravi knelt beside him. "I only did what you would have done." Haran smiled faintly. "Then my son has truly grown." He reached for Ravi's hand and said, "When I am gone, promise me one thing." Ravi swallowed hard. "Don't say that, father." But Haran continued, his voice fading like the evening wind. "Promise me you'll care for this land not as an inheritance, but as a living soul. Promise you'll guide the village as I guided you." Ravi pressed his father's hand to his forehead. "I promise, father. I'll protect it always." That night, as the rain began to fall softly outside, Haran drifted into sleep and never woke again. Mira wept quietly beside his still form, but Ravi didn't shed a tear. He sat by his father's bed until dawn, listening to the rain tapping gently against the roof, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. When morning came, Ravi walked outside and stood beneath the mango tree, the same one he had once revived as a foolish boy. The leaves swayed gently, and a single ripe mango dropped into his hand. He held it to his chest and whispered, "Rest now, father. The farm is safe." Weeks later, as the harvest began, Ravi gathered the entire village together. "This land," he said, standing tall under the golden sun, belongs to no master but to those who care for it. Let us share its blessings equally, so no child goes hungry again." The villagers cheered, tears in their eyes. Ravi distributed the harvest fairly, giving special shares to widows, elders, and the poor. The valley thrived again, stronger, kinder, and united. And from that day on, whenever anyone passed by the old mango tree, they would see Ravi sitting beneath it, speaking softly to the earth, as his father once had. But the story was not quite over, for one final test still awaited Ravi, a test of his heart and humility, one that would decide whether the farmer's son would be remembered merely as a man or as a legend of the valley. Seasons turned like pages in a well-loved book. The valley flourished again. Lush fields of wheat swayed in the wind, rivers sang softly across the meadows, and the cries of children playing echoed among the green hills. Ravi had kept his father's promise. The farm had not only survived, it had become the heart of the village. No one went hungry anymore. The farmers worked together, shared tools, and celebrated every harvest as one family. Ravi, once called the foolish son, was now known across the villages as the wise farmer. Yet despite the praise, Ravi remained humble. Each morning, he would rise before the sun, offer water to the earth, and whisper the same prayer his father once did. "Bless this soil that feeds us, forgive our mistakes, and teach us patience once more." He still lived in the same old farmhouse, with Mira tending the kitchen garden beside him. Though her hair had turned silver and his hands had grown rough, they found joy in simplicity. And under the shade of the great mango tree, now towering and full of fruit, they would often sit and speak of the past. One late summer evening, a traveler arrived at their door. He was a young man, dusty and weary from the road, his clothes tattered and his eyes filled with confusion. "Sir," the traveler said, bowing, "I've heard of the farmer who turned a dying land into paradise. They say you can make even barren soil bloom. Will you teach me how?" Ravi smiled gently. "The land blooms for anyone who listens to it."
"Sit, my boy.
"Tell me your story." The traveler sat under the mango tree as Ravi handed him water. He explained that he had once owned land in a distant village, but had lost it all because of greed and carelessness. "I was foolish," he admitted bitterly. "I took more than I gave. And now, everything is gone." Ravi chuckled softly, his eyes warm. Then you are not the first foolish son to walk this path." The traveler looked up, puzzled. Ravi continued, "Once, I too was blinded by pride. I thought wealth came from taking, not giving. I lost everything, my crops, my father's trust, and my hope. But my father showed me that the earth is a mirror. It gives back exactly what we sow, whether that's greed or love." The young man listened intently as Ravi spoke of his father's lessons, the dying mango tree, the storm, and the promise that changed everything. When he finished, the traveler's eyes were wet with tears. "Will you teach me?" the boy asked. Ravi smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I will teach you, yes. But remember, farming is not about the hands that plant, but the heart that nurtures. You must learn patience first. Tomorrow, we begin at sunrise." From that day, Ravi became not just a farmer, but a teacher. More travelers began to visit the valley, drawn by tales of the farmer of the golden fields. Ravi welcomed them all, teaching them not just to plant, but to live with gratitude. He told them stories of his father, of the mango tree that refused to die, and of the storms that tested men's souls. Each tale carried a seed of wisdom. Each listener left with a heart lighter than before. And so, Haran's legacy spread, through words, through deeds, through generations. Years later, when Ravi himself grew old, his hair white as cotton, he sat one evening beneath the same mango tree, watching the sunset. Around him, children played, the air alive with laughter. One of them, a curious little boy with bright eyes, ran up to him holding a small seed. "Uncle Ravi," the boy asked, "if I plant the seed, will it grow into a tree like this?" Ravi smiled, his wrinkled hands gently closing around the child's. "Yes, little one. It will grow if you love it enough. But promise me something, don't just water it.
Talk to it.
Thank it. Treat it like a friend. The boy giggled. A friend? Trees can't talk. Ravi laughed softly. Ah, but they listen. The earth always listens. As the child ran off to plant his seed, Ravi looked up at the mango tree one last time. Its branches stretched wide, strong and alive, bearing hundreds of golden fruits that glowed in the evening sun. He closed his eyes, feeling the warm wind brush his face, and whispered, "Father, your lesson lives on." That night, the stars shone brighter than ever before. When dawn came, Mira found Ravi sitting peacefully beneath the tree, his head resting against its trunk, a soft smile on his lips.
He had gone to join his father at last.
And so, the story of the foolish son who became a wise farmer lived on, not in gold or stone, but in the hearts of those who learned that the greatest harvest of all is understanding.